On June 30th, 1991, the quiet town of Galesburg, Illinois, was shaken by the tragic death of 23-year-old Danny Williams. Danny, the youngest son of Larry and Lois Williams, managed distribution for the family's successful apparel manufacturing company. Having recently purchased his first home at 950 Florence Street, Danny seemed to be embarking on a promising future. Concern arose when Danny's parents hadn't heard from him for nearly 2 days. On the evening of June 30th, they decided to check on him. Larry Williams entered the house and discovered Danny seated upright on the couch, a weapon resting in his lap, and a wound to his forehead. Larry immediately contacted the Galesburg Police Department. The initial investigation led police to consider the possibility that he ended himself. Police Chief John Schlaff noted that the position of Danny's body, the nature of the wound, and the absence of overt signs of foul play suggested a self-inflicted situation. Within a month, the case was officially classified as such. However, the Williams family harbored doubts about this conclusion. Larry Williams, familiar with weaponry, questioned the likelihood of Danny shooting in such a manner that the weapon would land neatly in his lap. Seeking clarity, the family hired private investigator Mike Turnquist. Turnquist uncovered a statement from neighbor Darlene Sayers, who claimed to have seen Danny on the morning of June 29th, several hours after the estimated time of death. She described witnessing Danny leave his house with a dark-haired woman in a blue car. Despite this account, police believed Sayers might have confused the days, as Danny's mother had picked him up on June 28th. Further complicating the timeline, other witnesses reported activity at Danny's residence on June 30th, including sightings of a young man with curly brown hair. Chief Schlaff suggested these witnesses might have been mistaken about the dates. Dissatisfied with the investigation's direction, Larry Williams enlisted forensic scientist Mark Bose. Using a laser luminescence scanner, Bose detected blood traces in areas inconsistent with a self-inflicted shot, including on the television set. Blood analysis revealed two distinct types, Danny's type B and an unidentified type O. This suggested the presence of another individual at the scene. However, the Illinois State Crime Lab contested these findings, attributing discrepancies to potential contamination during the crime scene cleanup. Additional evidence raised more questions. A second shell casing, matching Danny's weapon, was found inside the couch, implying a second shot had been fired. Bose also noted that the bullet's trajectory was inconsistent with Danny's position, arguing that a self-inflicted shot would have caused him to fall forward, not remain seated upright. Despite these anomalies, Chief Schlaff maintained that the evidence supported a self-deletion ruling. In August 1991, a coroner's jury delivered an uncertain verdict regarding Danny's manner of death, unable to conclusively determine how it occurred. One thing I couldn't find in my research is whether anyone tested Danny's hands for residue. Personally, I think that this piece of information may hold the key to whether Danny actually ended himself or whether he met with his fate at someone else's hand. That said, given that there was another set of blood found at the scene, I don't think this is simply a case of a family that can't accept a sad reality. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here, just reminding you to share this video with your friends and family. If you're enjoying my content, click the share button and send this video to 2 people who you think will like it. It's fascinating to imagine that a tiny difference in one moment can set off a series of events leading to a massively different outcome. This very idea sits at the heart of the butterfly effect. The term evokes an image of a butterfly gently flapping its wings and, in so doing, subtly shaping the weather on the other side of the world. While this image might sound poetic, it's rooted in a serious scientific concept. Small changes in initial conditions can have far-reaching and often unpredictable consequences. It's impossible to talk about the butterfly effect without first exploring chaos theory. Although the phrase chaos theory might bring to mind disorder and confusion, it's really the study of systems that appear to behave randomly, but actually follow strict deterministic rules. Mathematicians have long wrestled with the notion that certain formulas can produce incredibly complex patterns. One of the earliest mathematicians to notice how sensitive certain systems can be to initial conditions was Henri Poincaré in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. This began while he was examining the three-body problem, an attempt to predict the motions of celestial bodies under mutual gravitational influence. Poincaré found that tiny changes in the starting parameters could produce wildly varying outcomes. Although he didn't call it the butterfly effect, Poincaré's observations foreshadowed the core idea. Small shifts can yield big consequences. Chaos theory, at least in its more formal sense, started taking shape decades later. Researchers noticed that certain systems that should have been predictable, like weather or population growth, were actually extremely sensitive to initial conditions. They found that a tiny rounding error at the start of a calculation could become magnified to an astonishing degree after multiple iterations. If there's one name most often associated with the butterfly effect, it's Edward Lorenz. In 1961, Lorenz, a meteorologist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, was running computer simulations to model weather patterns. He used a simplified set of equations that tried to mimic how temperature, pressure, and other factors interact to create changes in the atmosphere. One day, he decided to shortcut the process by inputting a few decimal points from a previous simulation rather than starting from scratch. To his surprise, the new simulation gave a result entirely different from the earlier one. It wasn't just slightly off, it was completely unrecognizable. Upon closer inspection, Lorenz noticed that the numbers he had entered were rounded. For instance, instead of typing 0.506127, he typed 0.506, assuming the difference was negligible. This tiny discrepancy became magnified with each step in the simulation. Lorenz's discovery led him to ask whether something as small as a butterfly flapping its wings might influence weather patterns. This was a catchy way to illustrate how an infinitesimal change in one place could lead to a huge effect somewhere else. In 1972, Lorenz gave a talk titled Predictability. Does the flap of a butterfly's wings in Brazil set off a tornado in Texas? That talk popularized the term butterfly effect and forever linked the notion of chaotic behavior with the flutter of their wings. The butterfly effect is part of chaos theory, but it has some distinct principles worth highlighting. First and foremost is sensitive dependence on initial conditions. This idea says that if you know the exact starting values of a system, you can theoretically predict what happens next, because the system is deterministic. However, in practice, it's nearly impossible to measure the initial conditions with infinite precision. Even if we're only off by a tiny fraction, that error will expand rapidly in many chaotic systems. Another key principle is nonlinearity. In a linear system, changes are typically proportional. Double the input, and you double the output. But in nonlinear systems, outputs can be disproportionately large or small relative to their inputs. This makes them notoriously difficult to model or predict. Finally, there's the matter of long-term unpredictability. Short-term forecasting of chaotic systems might be possible, but as you extend your predictions further into the future, errors multiply until the predictions become meaningless. This challenge has very real consequences for meteorology, economics, ecology, and countless other fields. The butterfly effect isn't just about the weather or consequences of a time traveler stepping on a prehistoric insect. After Lorenz's insights, scientists and mathematicians began looking for chaotic behavior in many other domains. Economics, for instance, often deals with complex interactions. Consumer behavior, international trade policies, technological changes, and more. Tiny shifts in investor sentiment or government policy can cascade into massive stock market swings, a phenomenon some analysts describe as having a butterfly effect in finance. Ecologists also find the concept useful. Species populations can explode or crash based on subtle changes in birth rates, death rates, or migration patterns. A small uptick in the temperature of a particular region could push certain species to move or adapt, which can affect predators, prey, and the entire food web. Even psychology has toyed with the idea in social dynamics. The smallest interaction, a casual word or a minor decision, could set someone on a trajectory that significantly changes their life over time. Before Lorenz's work, most believed that the more equations we had and the more powerful our computers got, the more precisely we'd be able to forecast events like weather or the market. Lorenz showed that even if you had almost perfect measurements, slight inaccuracies in those measurements would eventually throw off your entire forecast. This revelation had profound implications. It didn't just apply to weather. It suggested that absolute precision in long-term predictions might never be achievable for many real-world systems. Rather than being a matter of needing more data or better equations, the unpredictability seemed baked into the very nature of the system. At first, this was disheartening. If even a small rounding error rendered predictions useless, how could we ever trust our forecasts? But scientists soon realized that short-term predictions often remain valid. You might not know what the weather will be like 2 weeks from now, but you can still be reasonably accurate about tomorrow, or even the next several days. The key is understanding that predictability in chaotic systems has limits, and once you pass those limits, all bets are off. Forecasting population growth for the next year or two may be highly accurate, while forecasting it for the next 25 or 50 years will give increasingly limited confidence in results. Beyond pure science, the butterfly effect sparks philosophical questions about determinism, free will, and personal responsibility. And personally, I think this is why the butterfly effect is widely known in popular culture. It really says something profound about who we are as individuals and why we make the decisions we do. If the future is so sensitive to small changes, does that mean everything's predetermined? Or does it mean that the world is essentially unpredictable? It's a paradoxical blend of determinism and unpredictability. Some interpret the butterfly effect to mean that every action matters, no matter how insignificant it might seem at the time. While this might be an oversimplification, it does suggest that our choices, even the trivial ones, can echo further than we think. On May 5th, 1997, Monica Rizzo left her job at the San Antonio Department of Human Resources without explanation, leaving her purse behind. And before we get into this case, the way I see the mystery here is not who did it, but why that person isn't locked up forever. Concerned colleagues attempted to reach her over the following days. After several days of unanswered calls, her supervisor finally contacted her at home. Monica explained she wasn't feeling well and would return to work on May 19th. However, she never did. On June 5th, 1997, an anonymous male caller informed the San Antonio Police Department that Monica had been slain by her husband, Leonard. He also advised that her bones were buried in their backyard. Officers promptly visited the Rizzo residence, where Leonard claimed he had last seen Monica on May 5th when she returned from work. He stated that a few days later, he awoke to find her gone but didn't report her missing, believing she would return. A search of the backyard revealed only animal bones, providing no immediate evidence to support the caller's claims. Exactly 1 month later, on July 5th, the same anonymous caller contacted the police again, this time specifying that Monica's remains were under a pile of tires in the backyard. This led to a more thorough investigation, during which authorities discovered human bones, hair, and other evidence in the backyard and barbecue pit. A team of forensic archaeologists from the University of Texas conducted an extensive excavation, uncovering over 200 bone fragments, each less than 3 inches long. The condition of the bones suggested they had been processed through a wood chipper or shredder. Given the circumstances, Leonard became the prime suspect. However, he consistently denied any involvement in Monica's disappearance or death, expressing bewilderment at the presence of human remains on his property. Inside the home, investigators found sections of drywall that had been bashed in, which Leonard attributed to his emotional distress over Monica's disappearance. Co-workers reported that Monica had been losing weight and appeared with bruises in the weeks leading up to her disappearance, raising serious concerns about possible abuse. Despite these factors, there was insufficient evidence to charge Leonard or anyone else with the crime. In 1999, Leonard was arrested for an incident involving his then-girlfriend, who reported that he had threatened to, quote, chop her up, put her in a garbage bag, and bury her. When police arrived at his home, a standoff ensued, ending with Leonard being shot by officers after he pointed a weapon at them. He survived and was later convicted on 4 criminal counts related to the incident. Despite these events, no charges were filed against him concerning Monica's death. As of 2025, the case remains open, with no new information leading to an arrest. So yeah, I think we all know who committed this horrific crime, and I really have to question how he's still a free man. I feel like the only thing that will quote-unquote solve this one is increased awareness of Monica Rizzo's case, and the public pressure that could come from that. The urban legend of the clown statue is a chilling tale that's been circulating online and in casual conversation since at least the early 2000s. At its core, this legend tells the story of a babysitter who grows increasingly uneasy about a strange statue in the home where she's been hired to watch children. When she contacts the parents to ask for permission to cover up or move the disturbing figure, they respond with confusion and alarm. They reveal that they don't own a clown statue and urge her to leave the house immediately. According to the legend, it's then discovered that what was presumed to be a statue was actually a person, sometimes an escaped criminal, disguised as a clown. The legend generally leaves it up to the imagination what the clown intended to do in the home. This urban legend has never been substantiated by reliable sources or confirmed through reputable news outlets. Fact-checking websites such as Snopes have categorized it among many babysitter-related horror tales that highlight the vulnerability of those tasked with caring for children in unfamiliar homes. Unlike documented criminal cases or verifiable reports, the clown statue lacks any credible evidence of its occurrence. Despite its fictional status, it continues to spread, partly because it taps into common human fears: fear of intruders, fear of clowns, and fear of being alone in a strange place. There's no single known origin point for this tale. Instead, it likely emerged as a variation on older babysitter horror stories, such as the famous urban legend, The Babysitter and the Man Upstairs, which dates back to the 1960s. Over time, as the internet became more accessible and storytelling forms flourished, the clown motif was added, reflecting the broader cultural discomfort many people have with clowns. By incorporating a clown into a classic home intruder narrative, the legend leverages a modern fear, making it even more memorable and shareable. One reason this particular legend endures is the ease with which it can be adapted to modern settings. It can take place in any suburban home, any small town, or any city. Unlike other urban legends tied to specific times or locations, the clown statue thrives on its plausibility in the everyday world. The story could just as easily be set in a big coastal metropolis as it could be in the rural Midwest. As long as people continue to hire babysitters and clowns remain associated with unease rather than entertainment, the story will retain its power. Wojtek, a Syrian brown bear, became an unlikely yet celebrated member of the Polish Second Corps during World War II. His journey from an orphaned cub in Iran to a war hero is a testament to the extraordinary bonds formed in the most unexpected circumstances. In April 1942, Polish soldiers stationed in Iran encountered a young shepherd boy near Hamadan who had found a bear cub. The cub's mother had likely been slain by hunters. Moved by the cub's plight, the soldiers traded for him, offering items like canned beef and chocolate. They named him Wojtek, a traditional Polish name that translates to happy warrior. Wojtek quickly became an integral part of the unit, learning to respond to Polish commands rather than his native Arabic. Initially fed condensed milk from an empty vodka bottle, he later developed tastes for fruits, honey, and marmalade. Interestingly, he also acquired a liking for beer, which he often shared with his comrades. Reportedly, Wojtek would even indulge in smoking and enjoyed wrestling with the soldiers, showcasing his playful nature. As the unit prepared to move from the Middle East to Italy to join the British Eighth Army, they faced a logistical challenge. British transport regulations prohibited animals on troop ships. To circumvent this, Wojtek was officially enlisted as a private in the Polish Army, complete with a service number and paybook. This enlistment allowed him to accompany his unit legally, since he was officially a soldier on par with his human comrades. During the grueling Battle of Monte Cassino in 1944, Wojtek's strength proved invaluable. He reportedly carried heavy crates of artillery shells, each weighing approximately 100 pounds, to aid in the resupply efforts. Witnesses noted that he never dropped a single crate, mirroring the actions of his fellow soldiers. In recognition of his contributions, the 22nd Artillery Supply Company adopted an emblem depicting a bear carrying an artillery shell. And personally, I think you may want to take a look at your screen right now if you're just listening, because damn, this emblem is aesthetic. After the war, the Polish Second Corps was demobilized, and Wojtek, along with his comrades, found temporary residence in Berwickshire, Scotland. He became a local celebrity, often visited by journalists and former soldiers. In 1947, Wojtek was transferred to Edinburgh Zoo, where he lived until his death in 1963. Former Polish soldiers would visit, bringing him gifts of food, tobacco, and beer, the bare necessities for Wojtek. While Wojtek's tale is heartwarming, it's natural to question the veracity of such an extraordinary story. Some historians have questioned whether the story was concocted as feel-good wartime propaganda. However, multiple credible sources corroborate the key events of his life. Numerous Polish sources corroborate Wojtek's involvement from their time in the Middle East. The British soldier's account of seeing a bear carrying crates of ammunition lends credence to the narrative. On the morning of May 26, 1998, Patricia Geron, a 45-year-old resident of Sioux City, Iowa, was slain in a home she had vacated 6 months prior. Her and her husband Gene had recently moved from across the road. They were in the process of selling remaining items from their former home, including a waterbed. According to reports, a man who had attended a previous yard sale at their former residence expressed interest in purchasing the waterbed. He allegedly made several calls to arrange a time to view the item. On that fateful Tuesday, Patricia went to meet this potential buyer at the old house, expecting to return shortly. Gene, from his vantage point in their new home, noticed a red car parked at the former residence during this time. When Patricia didn't return as anticipated, Gene went to check on her. He discovered a gruesome scene. The waterbed in the basement was covered in blood. Tragically, he found Patricia's lifeless body over an embankment outside the house. She had been stabbed so many times and with such force that the blade of the weapon broke. Evidence suggested that Patricia had been tied up with twine in the basement, but managed to free herself and attempt an escape before succumbing to her injuries. The Woodbury County Sheriff's Office, along with the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation, launched an investigation into Patricia's slaying. Given the personal nature of the attack, authorities believed that Patricia likely knew her assailant. Authorities also stated that they believed that there was no threat to public safety, which is generally interpreted to mean that an attack wasn't random, but targeted in some way. The red car observed by Jean became a focal point in the investigation, as it was seen at the residence around the time of the event, and is believed to be the perpetrator's vehicle. Despite these theories and leads, the case remained unsolved. Jean passed away on January 12, 2012, without seeing the case resolved. Personally, I can't shake the feeling that Jean's actions raise questions about his potential involvement. He was the one who noticed the red car from their new home, a sight that conveniently shifted blame to someone else. Notably, there's no indication that this distinctive red vehicle was seen by any other witnesses. Further, the police stated that there was no threat to public safety, which seems like a rather unusual statement given a woman was just slain while attempting to sell a waterbed to a stranger. If the authorities believed this version of events, would they really have stated that there was, quote, no threat to public safety? Also, the deeply personal nature of the slaying itself raises further questions that potentially indicate that her husband may have been the responsible party. That said, there's just not enough evidence one way or another to determine if he was involved. Like with all open investigations, we the public simply don't have access to all the investigative material that the authorities have. It could be that there's bankers' boxes of evidence sitting in Iowa somewhere which contain evidence that supports Jean's narrative, but we just don't know. The Pacific Northwest is known for its dense forests, towering mountains, and a long history of strange creature sightings. Among the region's lesser-known cryptids is the bat squatch, a creature described as a bizarre mix of a bat and a primate. The origins of the bat squatch legend are tied to the eruption of Mount St. Helens in Washington state on May 18, 1980. Following the catastrophic eruption, reports began to emerge of strange creatures seen in the area. The most famous early sighting occurred in 1994 when a man named Brian Canfield claimed to encounter a large winged humanoid while driving near Mount Rainier. According to Canfield, the creature stood about 9 feet tall, had glowing yellow eyes, bluish fur, and massive wings with a span of approximately 50 feet. Canfield described being frozen in terror as the beast stared at him before eventually flying away. This sighting gained significant attention in local media and among cryptid enthusiasts. Though no physical evidence was found to confirm Canfield's story, it laid the foundation for the bat squatch legend and inspired others to come forward with their own encounters. Over the years, additional sightings of creatures resembling bat squatch have been reported in various parts of the Pacific Northwest and beyond. One notable sighting took place in 2009 when hikers in Mount Shasta, California, described encountering a large winged creature that resembled a bat with primate-like features. Another report came from an anonymous pilot in 2011 who claimed to have seen a giant flying humanoid while flying near Mount Rainier. Some stories describe bat squatch as being capable of manipulating electronics, with witnesses reporting car engines stalling and radios malfunctioning during sightings. These details have led some to speculate that bat squatch could be more than a physical creature, possibly tied to supernatural or extraterrestrial phenomena. Skeptics argue that sightings of bat squatch are likely cases of misidentified animals, exaggerated stories, or outright hoaxes. Large birds, such as the great blue heron or turkey vulture, could be mistaken for winged humanoids, especially in low light or under stressful conditions. The Pacific Northwest is also home to owls with bright reflective eyes, which could contribute to reports of the bat squatch. And yes, for any longtime viewers of my channel, many skeptics believe that the bat squatch is indeed an owl misidentification. Skeptics also note that a primate-like being with wings would face significant biological challenges. They argue wings capable of supporting a 9-foot tall creature would require an enormous amount of muscle, likely making such a creature too heavy to fly. Another theory suggests that bat squatch might be an evolved version of the thunderbird, a legendary creature from indigenous folklore. Thunderbirds are often described as giant birds with supernatural powers, and some believe bat squatch could be a modern interpretation of this myth, adapted to fit contemporary lore. Still, believers in bat squatch point to the consistency of witness descriptions and the remote nature of many sightings as evidence that something unusual could be lurking in the wilderness.